Here we go on that.
Hello. I'm like, don't start with the regular one. Here we go. Like, hello from Japan.
Greetings. Konnichiwa. I actually don't know if that's right.
I think it
Oh my
is
goodness.
because I actually was learning about human design in the open throat yesterday, and there was like, hello, hola, konnichiwa, bonjour was all like in this little like bubble of like, when you have an open throat, you love to learn different languages. So I'm assuming it's,
Yeah.
but anyways.
So greetings from Japan. Konnichiwa. I am currently in Gunma, Japan, in the Shibukawa, helping my daughter through a difficult moment in her life, and I'm in her apartment right now. So I have been from Egypt, the Red Sea, to Annapolis, Maryland, in the US, and now to Japan, and on a completely different time zone yet again. And one of the things that I would like to invite all of our listeners to do at this moment is like, let's just stop for a second. Let's just hit the pause button. Look around. Notice where you are. Is it familiar? Is it the same thing that you see day in and day out? Are you in a different place? And how is your breath? Like, I use my breath to connect to my body, my breath and my heartbeat consistently. Just even in the coming here with their new COVID procedures and my test that I did ahead of time, not coming in, I sat in the airport and was waiting for my COVID test to come back, knowing that several people on the Egypt trip had had COVID and that my husband probably also had experienced it. And I was just noticing how the old version of me might have been a little freaked out being in a different country that I don't speak the language, going through new procedures. And so as I sat in the airport, I realized how valuable the ability, the skill for us to practice pressing the pause button and becoming very present with where we are right now. Even more so when we're in the same place that we've been. I was relating to my daughter that most accidents occur close to home. All of my car accidents that I'd been in when I was a teenager all occurred close to home. Because when we're in a familiar surrounding, oftentimes we let our minds go elsewhere. So take this moment right now to just notice, where are you? Are you in familiar surroundings, which could potentially make you a little bit more vulnerable to not being present with your body, not being present with your mind, not being present with your energy? So, on that note, here we are.
Let's play. So, because Tanya's doing the traveling, we have like reverse roles right now in our relationship.
So much so.
Jealousy is the word, but there's a little bit of enviousness happening right now. Because as you all know, go ahead, what were we going to say?
I was just like, this is so weird. It's like Freaky Friday, where we've just totally changed roles.
Yes. As you all know, travel is my love language, and Tanya's currently living it. So when, when you are like, wait, what airport am I in? What time zone I am? Like, that's like bliss for me. And Tanya's like, wait, what's happening here? So in her
my love language is transformation. I just really actually landed deeply into that space not that long ago, realizing that I am insatiable for change and transformation. And the the oddness is the stillness that that requires, the presence that that requires. So, yeah.
The funny thing is it's the same, right? I mean, this is what I've
Mhm.
said about travel all along, right? Like I love travel because it forces you to be present. It forces you to slow down. It forces you to only do one thing at a time because you're just in this new surrounding. You're trying to, figure out everything. You just come at it, a different way. But as Tanya has traveled on her journey over the last 6 weeks, when she was at the boat show, she was texting me as she was coming back. This podcast is about the difference between knowing and feeling in your body what deserving feels like, and then
Mhm.
what entitled feels like. Like, even when I say entitled, I'm like, ew, like, I don't want any part of that, very pompous and arrogant, like, no, I don't want that. But Tanya was, I guess this is going to be me interviewing Tanya, she's sitting in the airport and she has paid for tickets that typically, I'm gonna let her elaborate, but typically, get a certain kind of treatment. And this is what we were talking about before we hit record. I think deserving is from a place of love and honoring ourselves and being unattached to the outcome. But like, let's just use, since we're talking about flying, sitting in first class because our bodies love to have the space. They love to lay down. They love to be able to go to the bathroom. And, they like to drink all throughout the flight. Like, so many different things that our bodies love to have and do. But there's no attachment to an expectation of how it should be. Versus entitled, I think, is more of, you purchase a ticket for using the plane flight, you purchase it, and you have these certain expectations, rules, regulations that we expect others to live by because we have paid a certain amount for something. And so I'm curious, let me back up. In your body, how does deserving feel?
In my body, deserving feels like an open heart. Like it is open to receive whatever, and knowing that I am capable of receiving it. Like when we talked several podcast episodes ago about my experience of realizing that I, for a long time, had felt like I didn't deserve certain things. I didn't deserve to make, like, my threshold for how much money I could make was severely limited and hampered because I didn't feel like I deserved that abundance. So for me, deserving was something that I realized was very much in my heart, where I was closed off, feeling like I didn't deserve to receive money. I didn't deserve to receive love. I didn't deserve to receive um, the goodness of life, really, like all the goodness that life can be. I felt like I still needed to be punished for my bad deeds, for my misdoings, for the any wrongness that was me. And so in my realization of deservingness and my opening of my heart to receive that, um, I've just been playing and exploring with that. Um, like the very first time that I flew to you after we had done those podcasts, and I was such a wreck. Like my physical body was such a wreck, and flying first class and shitting my pants over, like, I just did this for myself. How's my husband going to feel? Is he going to get mad? Um, and then when this came up to come see Dominique, I was like, well, yeah, the first thing I'm going to look at is a first class ticket. And
And
when I booked our flight to Annapolis, I immediately went for the business select. So I had the flexibility of changing the ticket. And at that time, it was thinking, oh, it was for the cat. right? If something
Yeah.
came up that one of us couldn't go, that
Yeah.
it was easily refundable and all of that.
Yeah. I think deserving is more like a softening, a melting, just like an openness, like you're saying. That's how I experience it in my body. Versus entitled. I mean, I already kind of gave you like entitled feels very like, what does that feel like for you?
Entitled is very much in my head,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't feel good in the rest of my body. It actually, just saying this now, um, like if for our listeners, like I have my hands sort of making like the Vogue box around my head. Um, Entitlement feels like just being in that space of my
Mm-hmm.
mind, my head. It doesn't really actually feel connected to my body, other than
Yeah.
fear, like this sort of
Mm-hmm.
overall kind of like I'm in my mind with all the thoughts, and the general um essence, if you will, of fear is like this overall like uneasy feeling inside the body.
It also feels like for sure it's all in the head, like, because I think like when I have felt entitled, like my brain comes up with all the reasons why I should have this or it shouldn't be happening this way or whatever it might be. And also like a puff, like a false power, like a puffing up of my chest, like, like I don't want to say like in a fighting way, but definitely like an expansive, but not in a loving, expansive, open
Yeah.
way. So do you want to
And
tell
it's got
the
me
oh
burping. It's like I'm just realizing the fear is in that it's like it's in my tummy kind of fear, and then all the thoughts in my head are where the disconnect is. Like when I actually Tanya is burping. When I actually sat with your question for a second and I allowed that, like my mind to connect into my body, that sort of essence of fear settled down into my gut once you said that, especially like the puffing up of the chest. Like, yeah, like I need to protect myself, or I need to,
yeah,
like,
that's a good analogy. Like that's why the puffing of the chest, like I feel like they call me puffer fish a lot, but that's more like yeah, protection, but that's a little bit different. Puffer fish is a little bit of a different kind of protection, but that expansive, like I'm gonna show all my feathers, I'm gonna show you how powerful I am, but it all comes from the ego and the false power, not true
yes,
power.
yeah, it's like it creates this separation, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's this entitlement is like, well, I deserve more than you.
And it can also be, I deserve this because of XYZ. It could be because you paid for it and this is where I say it goes back to attachment, right? It's, I deserve XYZ because of these reasons. We have reasons why we think it should look a certain way, or we should be
Mhm.
treated a certain way, or we should have something or shouldn't have something, shouldn't be happening because we have this, um, playbook that we're going off of. If I pay this, or if I've done this, then I expect this. And that's what I mean when I say attachment. Is it's not just a straight up, like when I was going back to deserving, it's I paid for a first class ticket and I'm totally okay with however it happens and shows up.
Mhm.
It's, I expect to be treated a certain way because I have done this, and this is my expectation for you and everyone else to fulfill around me.
Yeah. It was interesting as you were saying that. I was seeing how that could have even played into um, something you and I both have experienced, which is like I did all the things I was supposed to. I worked the job, I sacrificed, I did all of these things. I should be entitled to a retirement, or I should be entitled to a pension, or I should be entitled to, fill in the blank. Like the world owes me something for what I have sacrificed, for what I have given, for what I have done, for who I am, whatever we've attached meaning to that. Yeah.
I want to say something because this is really interesting, because I think we can confuse the word deserving, because very much on the idea of I've worked hard, so I deserve XYZ, you could replace entitled with XYZ, right? So you have to be really mindful. And when I say mindful, what I mean is really of checking in with your body. And when we say deserving, we mean we are worthy of having and living an extraordinary life. All of us are, because we exist on this planet, period. End of story, right? Here we go back to like no attachment. It's just we are worthy of it because we are. When we are coming from that place of entitled, or we use the word deserving in the not worthy way, then that is, I've done something and I expect something in return, or I have certain expectations because of the things that I have done. So it's one is like, to me, tell me how you feel about this, Tanya, is like deserving or worthiness from the heart space is like being, and then entitled, or if you use the word deserving from that place of, I expect it, that is more of a doing, something I've done and I expect it to be as, to then pan out a certain way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The attachment, the expectation, like it can be on both sides of deserving or not deserving, entitled or not entitled, and all the judgments that we make around that. It's all about the separateness too. And it's about like, this is what we have to do in order to have, versus this is who we be. Believing that we are worthy, believing that we are deserving is, it really is that heart space. Even the entitlement, like the entitlement is just coming up from the fear of, like, it's the old model of creating separation in order to allow us to be okay. And it doesn't matter what side you're sitting on, the entitled or not entitled, or deserving or undeserving, it's still that same polarity that we experience as human beings, right? When we're living from a fear base, it's always going to pull us back to that fear. And that fear shows up as, well, I'm entitled to this, or I'm not entitled, or I'm deserving of this, or I'm not deserving, rather than it just being what it is. Like, just, we are, as human beings, we are dualistic in nature, which creates a separation within us. And that separation is between our fear and our desire. Like, how does fear and desire show up in deservingness? And how does fear and desire show up in entitlement? I just went down a hole.
Sometimes I got to ask the questions that keep Tanya on track. But here's what we want to know. We want to know, and we've talked about this on multiple podcasts, multiple times, and we teach this, is sometimes we have to go all the way over to the other side. Like when we are learning, when we are practicing becoming someone new, let me take this idea off the table to explain it to some people, our listeners, of like, sometimes if we've always been a people pleaser, sometimes you just have to say no to everything, because you're practicing that muscle of the no, to then come back and be like, okay, well, there are some things I want to contribute or participate in, because you're so used to, it's like you've got to go very rigid because your boundaries have been so lax, daisical, or open that you have to practice going all the way over to the other side. So in your deserving, once you in August, right, like you realize, okay, I'm deserving because I just exist on this planet.
Mhm.
And then you have swung over to the other side a little bit for the entitlement.
I totally did.
7-year-old Tanya came out.
Oh my gosh, I texted Erin and I said, I'm having this like princess pout moment. I'm exploring this entitlement um, experience that I was having in the airport. Yeah.
And I want to say, this is because for those of you that are like me, Erin, who are in your or have been in your mind a lot, it's very subtle because, and this is where you have to drop into your body and you have to check in with like, where does this show up in my body? Because the thing that I texted back to Tanya was, are you actually afraid of saying you want to go home early or you want to get on a different flight and breaking that connection and allowing people to be disappointed with you? And what Tanya texted back was like, oh, it's not really that. It's actually me having to learn how to sit with and be okay and experiencing this entitlement moment and like, how do I want to feel? But if you weren't present, if you weren't curious, you might have mistook what was occurring for, oh, I just don't want to, like a people pleasing moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because you sat with it and you got curious and you investigated a little bit further and you checked in with your body, you're like, oh no, this is like 7-year-old Tanya having a little hissy fit because things aren't going the way that she wants them to.
Yeah.
So what were some of your ahas that you came to realize by sitting there and allowing yourself to feel entitled and upset?
So probably the biggest aha that I had was how much suffer, like we are wired, human beings are wired for pleasure and pain. We are dualistic in nature. Are we have fear and we have desire. And those two are oftentimes very much in conflict or seemingly in conflict with each other. And as I was sitting there and I was like, oh, I'm experiencing this entitlement. And then I texted you, I'm like, I'm having this princess pout moment and I'm feeling entitled. And you're like, is it because you actually wanted to go home but didn't want to break connection? And as I was asking myself, I was like, does it matter if I get home earlier? No, not really. I mean, my mind was wanting to tell me that if we missed the last connection, um, that I was going to have to rearrange our meeting. And I also was still like, I had just found out about Dominique breaking her arm, and I didn't know if she was going to want me to come or not. So I had that looming, and I'm like, there's so many moving pieces in the air. Is it that I really feel like I need to be home earlier? No. What is this? And then it was like, look at all the suffering that we create when we are in our minds and not in our hearts. And so as I sat there, I'm sitting in the airport and I'm like, what do I want to do right now? Like, here's where I'm at. What do I want to do right now? You know what? I don't want to just sit in the airport. I want to put some music on and I want to walk around. So I did that. I put on my playlist that is my what's called becoming. I have a curated playlist that I put together that I'm very mindful of what the lyrics say, what the kind of the vibration and feeling of the songs is. And I put that in and I'm like, it doesn't fucking matter where I'm at. Like, I appreciate travel and I don't need travel because I can choose to be in this energy. Like for me, this is all the things that I love, right? I can either bring into my mind all the things that I love, or I can um, I can bring into my mind all of the things that are creating suffering. I should be somewhere else right now. I should have been able to get on an earlier flight. Um, I should be prioritized because I have this particular ticket. Um, I should be able to say that if I'm traveling with other people, that these are my expectations. Like I think about a movie star when they send, like, I want all
Yes.
green
And the dresses.
M&Ms in a bowl, and I want like a big mirror on my dress. Like, and I was just realizing like all of this is happening right here, and my fingers are pointing to my noggin. Like all of that suffering that's created when I'm believing that something should be any different than what it is right now. So the question I started asking myself, how is this moment absolutely perfect? How is it that this moment is like the pure epitome of perfection, that it shouldn't be any other way? And so, yeah, that was a huge realization.
But not before you felt entitled. This is
Oh
what I
no.
want listeners to make sure that they know, that we aren't sugarcoating or, putting a little tiny band-aid over our feelings, right? We need to feel the feeling
Yep.
entitlement currently, right? And
Hmm.
then after she was like, oh, this doesn't feel good in my body, and not from a resistance, but more so like, this is not who I am, right? We
Hmm.
are all people who are not entitled people. That's not who we truly are. And so
Yep.
then you getting to be like, okay, felt the entitlement. That doesn't feel very good. Now, what do I choose in this
Hmm.
moment to feel and to be?
Yeah. So the awareness has to precede the change. Um, so when I first texted Erin and said, "Oh, I'm having this like princess pout moment. I'm feeling entitled." I did sit for a few minutes and I looked around. I kind of oriented. I'm like, "Okay, here I am right now, and I'm feeling this aspect within me that says, we should have been able to go home. Why didn't they change their flight? Why wouldn't they be willing to pay more for their ticket? Why didn't they pay more for their ticket originally?" Well, I kind of get that because that used to be me. Why wouldn't they pay? Well, that was a lot of money, to $800 to get it home a few hours earlier. And so I just let that part of me that was like
Be seen.
seriously pouting be seen. And I was like,
Mhm.
baby girl, of course you feel this way, because it either hasn't felt safe to be where you're at. It hasn't felt safe to, like, what did I have? In fact, my daughter even brought this up here, is the messaging that I got when I was young was, if I expected something or I felt entitled to something, that I was a spoiled brat, right?
Lots of parents say
So,
that.
yeah,
Lots of parents say that.
like, you don't appreciate what you have. And as a
Yep.
manifest generator, someone who has to do lots of things or be like, have lots of things, whether that be activities or things or whatever, right? Um, being multitasking, there was always this sense of, you don't appreciate what you have. Like, you haven't finished this painting project that you got. You haven't finished this macrame thing that you got. You're a spoiled brat because you already have all of these things and you're asking for more. Um, and that's that entitled coming up feeling like, um, well, aren't I special? Shouldn't I have that? And allowing that part of me to come up and to be seen, and allowing her to just be like, I paid extra money for a ticket and I'm not even getting to use it right now. Why did I even bother? And why is everybody else so cheap? And why is this happening with the airlines? And why do I get stuck here in this airport? And what if we do end up having to spend the night on the floor in the Denver airport? And why did Greg say that he'd done that so many times? Like, he's just manifesting me into this bad position. Like, it's all his fault for manifesting this idea about having to sleep in an airport. And I don't want to do that.
What this what this does, and you kind of alluded to it, is it takes us out of the present. It takes us out of experiencing what we are currently experiencing and
Feeling.
feeling, right? And just being with it. And I know I've talked about previous podcasts of that, the Buddhist, I think poem, of the two arrows. It's like the first arrow was the, that just is, right? It's the airline telling you, hey, listen, you may not catch your flight, or, it's going to be delayed for a little bit. But we, as the humans, then cast the second arrow, which is all of the suffering involved with all of that, versus acceptance of it's perfect right here, right now, and finding, the beauty in it. And also not before we have temper tantrums and feel our feelings either, right?
Yeah.
So.
And like allowing, I've gotten practiced at allowing that part of me to come up and to be seen without judgment, like just holding the space for myself.
Yep.
To, like, of course you felt this way, baby girl. You've been told all your life you're either a spoiled brat, or you're not considering others, or you're not, like, that even triggered off this, the, like, I've always been the people pleaser, do what everybody else wants, because I heard enough when I was little that I was a spoiled brat. I shouldn't ask for what I want, which is all of what was coming up in Annapolis. Me asking for, what do I want? I don't know. I stopped asking. I stopped asking, what do I want? Because I was always told it was wrong, right? And how many of us have, like, for you, your experience of asking for what you want, and the feelings that that creates, what comes up, the, like, what do you deserve and what are you entitled? What has been your experience there?
I think it's always been me wanting and then me getting it shut down for monetary reasons. I know I've talked about this before. And so regardless of, how we're met with, we ultimately just stop asking, right? We stop dreaming because we get told no. I mean, I don't want to liken it to the beaten dog, but in a way, right? Like at some point you just stop asking because you know what the answer is going to be. And I think what I wanted to say with the comment on the parents, we think we're being helpful when we tell our children you should be grateful. But I feel like, and I've done this to my kid in the past, being unaware, but what that does is it doesn't allow them to feel their feelings. It shuts them down, because in that moment, it basically, you're saying how you're feeling is not okay. You need to feel grateful. And what Tanya was having to do is, reparent, her inner child of like, it's okay to feel how you're feeling in this moment. And the goal of our feelings is not to feel better all the time, right? That's not, yes, our baseline is joy. We want our baseline to be love and joy and compassion, and wonder and all of those things. But we dip down into, entitlement and depression and grief and, sadness and all of these things. And when we don't give ourselves the chance to experience our emotions, rob is what comes to mind. Like we rob ourselves of that experience, right? And it's the practice of processing and passing through and experiencing those emotions to then get back up to our baseline. So I think it's important, because I say this a lot for our listeners and for the people that we coach and everyone that we, interact with, is the goal isn't to not feel all of those lower vibration emotions. It's just to feel them and to move through them, and then to choose powerfully how do we want to feel after we felt what we've needed to feel? And I think for you in that moment, it was you getting to feel that entitlement and getting to pout, because how many kids get to pout, right? Like, we don't get to pout. That's not allowed.
Oh yeah. That
Oh
was
yeah.
like,
Oh yeah.
that was not okay. Like,
Yeah.
you just stop your pouting right now.
Yeah.
You should be
Some of us
grateful
got,
for what you have.
yeah, we either got spanked or we got sent to our room or like shut down. That is not okay. And so teaching ourselves that all of our emotions are welcome, right? They're all valid here. And that there is beauty and insight in them, right? Like that entitlement got to show you, like, hey, it hasn't been safe for me to express my emotion in this specific, entitlement ish, feeling area,
Yeah.
right?
It hadn't been safe for me to say, I want to go home early.
Yep.
Um, it hadn't been safe for me to say, well, okay, you guys have your tickets. And even though
Yep.
we're like connecting on a ride on the other side, I want to get on this flight. Um, yeah, it was being able to sit with and be present with those feelings, not from a place of judgment, but a place of curiosity. In fact, if anything, the judgment that was there, this is one of the things that I practice with I have the full channel of definition in human design of 18 to, I believe it's 58. 58 is all about dissatisfaction, disappointment, um, and 18 is all about perfection. And so, asking that question, how is this moment perfect? My little girl got to be seen in that moment, like this whole experience that was going on inside of me. I think another thing that's important to point out to people is that we are so practiced in not feeling. We are so practiced in saying, I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to feel this way. So we do things where we try and avoid situations, we try and avoid scenarios that put us in this position of not wanting to feel. We talk to so many people that say, I'm afraid to actually let myself go there because I'm afraid I won't ever get back out. Like I'm
Yep.
going to get stuck there. But what they don't realize, and this is because fear puts so much survival pressure on us, what they don't realize is that in the avoidance of not feeling something, they're keeping themselves feeling that regardless. That resistance to feeling a certain emotion, afraid that you might fall into it and never come out,
Yep.
is the thing that actually keeps you
there.
falling into it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's terrifying. Like sitting there, I had a few minutes where it was like, okay, focus on my breath. What am I feeling in my body?
It's terrifying as long as we believe the stories that our brain are telling us. When we can
Yes.
disassociate, one of the things I really want to, amplify or elaborate on for our listeners is when we can disassociate that we are not entitled, right? We are just experiencing the emotion of entitlement, or our mind or our brain is telling us these things, but that's not who we truly are. When we can sit from a loving, compassionate window seat and watch the story go by, it's not painful. It still creates some sensations in our body that feel rather uncomfortable, but we know we can see that, at least for me, what I've been able to see is like, oh, when I'm having some of these, it's like I'm aware and I'm able to be like, okay, my conscious mind knows this is not true. My body, my subconscious isn't quite there yet, but it at least gives some separation to be like, I know this isn't really the deal, right? And so being in that practice of like, I am not entitled. I'm just having a feeling of entitled, and I'm hearing what my brain is saying, but that's not who I am. And like you say, some breathing, some just sitting there watching it. I mean, sometimes our brains are like, for real, did you just say that? You're just throwing all the things at us right now. Like, okay, I see what's happening. So yeah, so just practicing your breath, practicing just watching, for some of us, we like to journal, that might be good, or even just note taking on your phone. Like, what are all the things that my brain is saying? And then it's a learning of, you'll see that your brain is very boring and very repetitive, and it will throw those same phrases or same things at you when you're ready to up level. It's like, oh, let me serve you up entitlement again, right? Like, or guilt has been mine, right? It's like, let me serve you up guilt. It's like, oh, this is so boring. Here we go again. So just recognizing, that we aren't our feelings, we aren't what our brain tells us.
Yeah, that was a really important piece when I very first kind of started this practice, was um, being able to recognize what I was thinking and what I was feeling. So I would journal. Oftentimes, I would journal some really awful stuff. I would just be like, okay, whatever it is that my brain is saying right now, I'm just going to be like a note taker. I'm just going to write all
Yeah.
this stuff down. And then I would walk away from it and come back and read my journal and be like, oh my God, read it from a place of, this is what I was saying about, like, maybe my best friend or someone that I loved, or my husband or my mom or my kid. Oh my gosh. Like, if any of you
Yeah,
have
that's a tough one.
children, yeah, reading back through like, once you've had one of those mind dumps that says, you're such a loser. I can't believe you said that. You're so stupid. I would journal that stuff out, like, verbatim. I would take notes on what it was I said. And then I would imagine reading that to my kid.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
holy shit. Right.
Yeah.
But this was that beginning practice for me, with the awareness and sitting and meditating. And most people talk about meditation from, like, oh, you just clear your mind. No, 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 that did not happen for me. My sitting with meditation would be to put myself in a safe place. It would be to put on some music or some frequency, like some solfeggio beats in the background. But then I would watch my mind as it was just like saying all these things, showing me all these things. And I started, like, sometimes taking notes during my meditation, sometimes doing a verbal thing. But I would recognize that, like, for me, meditation wasn't about quieting my mind. It was actually about kind of taking a step back from it and just witnessing it and all the
Yes.
things that it wanted to say, and being curious about that. That's kind of where that first learning how to do curious
Yeah.
came in
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. I want to say before we leave, of like, so maybe this week, if you're open to it, for our listeners, of practicing and just being curious, like what Tanya said, of where do I feel deserving and where do I feel entitled, and how does that feel different in my body? And is there, sometimes there's, I don't want to say a pattern, but sometimes there's certain things that we feel entitled towards, and then some things, we feel or don't feel deserving of. So just notice kind of where you might be experiencing or not experiencing deserving. And the same thing goes for entitled as well.
Yeah. What do you feel like maybe you're owed or you're expecting? And what is that tied to?
Yeah.
Because it can look like all different kinds of things. It can look like entitled to a first class ticket, entitled to not having a mother and her child sitting next to you on a first class ticket. It could also look like entitled to
not wait at a restaurant.
Not wait at a restaurant. Entitled to having your spouse recognize what you need.
Yep.
Entitled to other people considering your feelings. Yeah. Show up in lots of different delicious ways to be curious about.
So get curious, drop into your body if you're able to, and just check in and see, what does deserving feel like and what does entitled, and where do you notice where it shows up in both? Because we all have both, right? That's the other thing. It's not like we're sitting over here being like, we never feel entitled. Oh, feel entitled sometimes. Then I got to check myself. Hang on a second. So
yeah,
that is where we leave you with, friends. Okay. Until next time.
until next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Love you.
Bye.